Hi, I'm Ben Ferguson, and welcome to your AMAC Weekly News. First up, violence is striking another state, Wisconsin. That's right, after a whole nother week of riots and destruction, really all across the country, this now because of another police-involved shooting. What's shocking is, even before the facts have come out, we are seeing rioters organize and then go out in their communities and destroy everything they can get their hands on. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. Up next, in a complete contrast to what we saw last week at the DNC convention, the RNC convention focused on honoring the great American story. Now, even in the midst of this incredible positivity and celebration, liberals are still trying to find a way to make it all about them and attack the Republicans for loving this country. Hillary Clinton even came out with a crazy idea, a suggestion to Joe Biden that would take away from what we are, a democracy and our Constitution. I'll tell you what she said coming up in just a moment. And finally, AMAC Action President Bob Carlstrom is here to respond to how liberals have blamed the president for COVID-19 yet again. All that and more in just a quick second. But a quick reminder, if you haven't shared this video with your family and friends and you want to frustrate and irritate the left, make sure you share it right now. Your AMAC Weekly News starts right now. Buildings being burned to the ground, shots being fired, and the killing of at least 2 this past week, all in response to a police-involved shooting that was caught on tape and went viral out of Wisconsin. Now, I want you to take a look at some of the raw footage of this week posted on Twitter of the anarchy in Wisconsin. People whose livelihoods have been destroyed, all because of a viral video taken, well, without any context from those that just want to burn down their own city. Take a look. Yes, this is anarchy and riots. And can anyone tell me why in the world that this makes anything better for the man who has shot Jacob Blake or anyone else in this community? Now, to be clear, Blake was shot multiple times by police in Wisconsin and is now alive, but paralyzed because of the shooting. The shooting would never have happened if Blake would have complied with the police during this attempted arrest. Yes, anytime there is a police shooting, there should be a full investigation, and there is going to be one. Now, Jacob Blake was shot after fighting and resisting arrest from the police. And there is even video footage of that to prove that point to the community. Now, what is interesting is Blake's mother, Julia Jackson, has flat out said that she is, quote, disgusted by the behavior in the city in response to her son's involved shooting with the police. I want you to take a look at this interview with Blake's parents from CNN.
My family and I are very hurt and, quite frankly, disgusted. And as his mother, please don't burn up property and cause havoc and tear your own homes down in my son's name.
Now, Blake's mother is seeing what's happening in her actual community. She's right. This is disgusting. This has gone further than just tearing down property. In fact, more lives have literally been lost, not because of law enforcement, but because of these so-called protests. These, I want to make clear, are not protests. This is anarchy. Take a look at this in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Now, we as Americans should hear that loud and clear. It's time for governors to start to stand up for law and order and these communities that are being destroyed. So many cities are being destroyed and people are dying during these protests, yet many on the left are refusing to stop it. Now, thank goodness, over the past week, the governor of Tennessee showed the country what actual leadership looks like when he signed a bill cracking down on this type of violence. Now, this bill includes a mandatory 45-day sentence for people convicted of aggravated rioting. Also, raising the fine for blocking highway access to emergency vehicles and increasing the penalty for aggravated assault against a first responder to a Class C felony. Now, the governor of Tennessee, Governor Lee, he also wanted to remind his citizens that if you are found guilty in the state of one of these felonies, that you're going to lose your right to vote as well. What the governor's really done is given a blueprint to the rest of the nation on how to deal with these anarchists. And this is what other states need to be doing across the nation, especially now in Wisconsin. Now, we need to make sure that this happens, and we need to be putting pressure on our state legislators to make sure they understand that we as Americans believe this has gone too far. And AMAC will make sure that your voices are heard, not just in Washington, but also at the state level on this issue. The 2020 Republican National Convention truly took on the idea of honoring the great American story. We heard heartwarming and uplifting stories from Americans whose lives have been changed for the better because of our country and because of our president, Donald Trump, and his laws and actions that he's taken over the last 3+ years. I want you to just take a look at one moment from the RNC that aired on Fox News.
When he stood there in that graduation and he went out of his way to shake the hand of every one of those 29 graduates, set them on a whole nother vista of life because they had the office of the President of the United States. The promises that he made was promises that he kept.
So now I'd like to invite John's wife, Jamie, to join us as I grant John, I'm not sure you know this, a full pardon.
Not only was this one of the most powerful moments of the Republican convention, but it's also a reminder about what makes this country so great. Now, of course, not everyone in this country is celebrating what our country actually is. The mainstream media and liberals have taken to trying anything and everything to keep Americans from watching the positivity and American spirit streaming out of the Republican convention. In fact, the left is now going to total government takeover and anarchy to make sure that they win this election. Where's it coming from? The top of the Democratic Party. I'm about to show you a video of Hillary Clinton giving Joe Biden some serious anti-American and anti-freedom Marxist advice. Now, to be clear, this was not an undercover video that surfaced or undercover audio that was taken that Hillary thought would never see the light of the day. In fact, she did this during a live, real interview. Take a look.
So we've got to have a massive legal operation. I know the Biden campaign is working on that. We have to have poll workers, and I urge people who are able to be a poll worker. We have to have our own teams of people to counter the force of intimidation that the Republicans and Trump are going to put outside polling places. This is a big organizational challenge, but at least we know more about what they're going to do. And, you know, Joe Biden should not concede under any circumstances because I think this is going to drag out. And eventually, I do believe he will win if we don't give an inch.
For many of you, that's probably the first time you've even seen this clip, which has now been out for almost an entire week. And what's even more crazy is that she literally just told Joe Biden to not concede the election, even if President Trump rightfully wins re-election. Now, I want you to imagine if Trump would have said this or any other member of the GOP. There would be wall-to-wall coverage from the liberal media saying that you literally have a Republican Party trying to overthrow the will of the people and our democracy and our Constitution. Yet, Hillary Clinton says it, and they say nothing at all. Now, Hillary's words are clearly tied into this new conspiracy theory that they've been pushing on the United States Postal Service. Now, what's crazy about the media, what they're doing, and also the Democrats, is they're actually coming out claiming that Donald Trump doesn't want Americans to be able to vote by mail because he is afraid of losing an election by mail. And by the way, that's not what the president said at all. He has no problem with people, by the way, absentee voting, which is by mail. However, I want you to hear about what the Postmaster General had to say this week when the Democrats actually called a House Oversight and Reform Committee hearing saying that the president's trying to destroy your right to vote, which is just not true. And most importantly, I want you to hear him respond to these allegations that somehow there's a conspiracy theory to make sure you can't vote. Take a listen.
As part of this conversation, there are many inaccuracies about my actions that I wish to again correct. First, I did not direct the removal of blue collection boxes or the removal of mail processing equipment. Second, I did not direct the cutback on hours at any of our post offices. And finally, I did not direct the elimination or any cutback in overtime. I did, however, suspend these practices to remove any misperceptions about our commitment to delivering the nation's election mail. Any further assertions by the media or elected officials is furthering a false narrative to the American people.
You just witnessed the Postmaster General debunking the entire liberal conspiracy theory that Hillary Clinton is now using to say that we should never concede the election to the Republicans, even if we lose. You would think the media would actually cover that, but don't worry, they're not going to. I also want you to know something else that just happened. Big breaking news. The United States Postal Service Union, the same union that got busted in the 2016 election, breaking the law as they were campaigning for Hillary Clinton, has come out with their endorsement in this election. Guess who they picked? Joe Biden. So to recap, the Postal Service, the union, expect us to 100% trust that the United States Postal Service, with our presidential election ballots coming into their hands, are not going to be pushing everything for Joe Biden, the same candidate that they just endorsed. Now, in my opinion, and I think most Americans would agree with me, this is a serious conflict of interest. It doesn't matter what liberals in the mainstream media do or say or try to cover for this insane conspiracy theory. What I do know is this. There are serious questions now that are being raised about the trustworthiness of the Postal Service. And let's not forget that we as the American people should trust that when our ballots go through the mail, that they're not going to disappear, that they are not going to be tampered with, that they're not going to not get delivered, which is exactly what the left is now saying is going to happen unless they get their way. Now, at AMAC, we are going to make sure that we watch very closely and advocate for all Americans, because no matter what party you are actually in, you should know that if you do vote by mail, that your vote is going to be counted and it's going to be protected from disappearing from people that might have a huge conflict of interest politically, just like the union who has endorsed Joe Biden. It has been an absolute insane week, from the Democratic convention to the Republican convention to anarchy in Wisconsin and Hillary Clinton saying, I'm not going to concede the election, plus something else. Democrats are going to attack over COVID-19 again against Donald Trump. So joining me now to talk about all of this is the president of AMAC Action, Bob Carlstrom. Bob, I appreciate you joining us today, and I want to get straight into this. We are seeing more anarchy in this country. Now people are dying in the streets during these protests, specifically in Wisconsin, and we saw a governor finally step up. Governor Lee in Tennessee has come out and changed the laws there to say, you get busted in this anarchy, you're going to jail, you're going to be a felon, you're going to lose your right to vote. We are not putting up with it. Do you think other governors will get behind this and start doing it for their own citizens?
Well, I hope that they do, Ben, and clearly they need to do it promptly and not wait and let things get out of control, because rioting and violence is criminal, it's felonious, and certainly those individuals who engage in that ought to be criminally prosecuted for what they've done. That is not peaceful demonstration. That is violence. It is crime. It is rioting, and it needs to be stopped. And I really call on the other governors when this occurs to step in immediately. You know, thank goodness that the governor of Wisconsin has also sent in the state National Guard to intervene and help out the police there, because it's fundamentally wrong. You know, one individual, was sadly wounded very badly, and that case is under investigation. But now 3 people shot as a result of that. That's just meaningless, terrible violence. and criminal conduct.
You see a clear compare and contrast here. The Democratic convention did not criticize at all any of this anarchy around the country. The Republicans clearly seem to want to seize on this. We are the party of law and order. I think it's one of the smartest moves that the Republican convention did, was showing we as a party are not going to put up with what is happening in these liberal cities.
Absolutely. There shouldn't be any tolerance whatsoever for violence. And shame on the local leaders and the governors for being so slow to react to it, because it really is unconscionable. People have a right to live in peace and in prosperity and in the safety of their neighborhoods and the safety of their towns. And to tolerate and have officials in government tolerate that kind of conduct is just unseemly and really wrong. And they really fail themselves, and they fail their constituents in their public responsibilities.
Bob, I want to switch gears real quick to something else. And what we can see coming out of the Democratic convention is a clear strategy by the left to blame Donald Trump for COVID-19. This is something that I guess they say, this is what we got to sell the American people. This is our main issue. We are going to go out there and say, this would have never happened if we were in the White House. Vote for Joe Biden. Do you think it's going to work?
Oh, I think, when you listen to what they're saying, it really is fundamentally more and more of this Trump derangement syndrome, but particularly for blaming the president for the COVID virus situation is meaningless. The president stepped in January and stopped the arrivals from people from China immediately. WHO concealed it. They shilled for the Chinese government. The president has done everything that he could possibly do from a federal level. Remember that we live in a republic, and there are some certain limitations that the federal government has in terms of what it's done. And the president has done everything. But the primary responsibility at the local level and state level really lies with the governor and lies with the local officials. And that is where the day-to-day operational management and response to this challenge has to be met.
We know the Democrats didn't like the results of the last presidential election, and they tried to overthrow the will of the people in a free and fair election with this insane investigation into collusion with the Russians and, of course, even impeaching the president in the House. But this week, there was something even more shocking that happened. Hillary Clinton, during an interview, said under no circumstances should Joe Biden concede the election to Donald Trump, even if he wins. Your reaction to this anarchy?
Well, that's terrible of her to say that, and that's one reason why I think the Democrats really want this all-male voting situation to happen. What that will do is totally destroy the integrity of the American voting process. It'll be fraught with fraud. It's very difficult to police. It would delay actually determination of who finally wins. Goodness knows what would happen on January 20 if, in fact, these votes still have never been counted. The whole thing is a ploy by the Democratic Party to, again, unseat Donald Trump and to elect one of their own. Imagine this, that if the votes weren't counted satisfactorily and the Electoral College was unable to meet before January 20, who would then be the acting president of the United States? It would be the Speaker of the House, whoever that might be. So, it's a terrible.
Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nancy Pelosi.
Can one imagine?
Bob, I appreciate you coming on and the work that you guys at AMAC Action are done trying to hold Washington accountable, certainly on this issue of COVID-19 and the Postal Service. Thanks again for being a part of the show this week.
Thanks for having me. Good to be with you.
That's it for this edition of your AMAC Weekly News. A very quick and important reminder, for so many of you, your memberships are coming due. And if you haven't renewed your AMAC membership, make sure you do it. It's so important now with the election coming in November that we can count each and every one of you as a member so that we have access to the people in Washington that we need to fight for what we believe in. Also, if you haven't ever joined AMAC, make sure you do it right now. You'll get the AMAC magazine and other incredible member benefits. But most importantly, you have someone advocating for our values all across the country and in Washington, D.C. I'm Ben Ferguson, and I'll see you back next week for our next episode.